All right, good evening. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Mr. Baber will not be able to join us this evening. He is being a wonderful dad, dealing with some positive family stuff. So we have graciously excused him from that. Aside from that, the rest of us are here. Actual first order of business is to consider the approval of the January 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or questions on the minutes? No? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for our January 23rd, 2024 Planning Board meeting.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Next up, public comments. I don't believe anyone has signed up to speak, so we will move on to our action agenda. So the first item on the agenda, we're going to consider a recommendation on petition R23-06. This is the Beatties Ford Entertainment Project. It's a request by Jonathan Uri and Katie Carpenter to rezone approximately 2.5 acres at 9349, also 9339, 9331 Beatties Ford Road. And that's to take it from rural district to highway commercial conditional district to allow outdoor recreation and office use. Mr. Farber, go for it.
Good evening. Before I begin, I'll submit my staff report into the record and go through a little background. So this rezoning was originally submitted in June of 2023. In September of last year, the town board made a motion to approve. The motion failed, and then no further motion was made. And then in December of last year, the town board then directed staff to call for and re-advertise a public hearing for this rezoning. So the applicants, Jonathan Uri and Katie Carpenter, are proposing to rezone 2.5 acres of the zoning or of the rural zoning district to highway commercial with conditions. And this is an aerial view of the property in question. The uses will be limited to only outdoor recreation and a meeting and office space. A 10-foot side path along Beatties Ford Road and a 5-foot sidewalk along Broadway Street will be provided. The parking lot has been moved to the rear, and they will be providing 22 mulch parking spots. And the applicants have also provided a 6-foot privacy fence along the rear of the property. 89% of the specimen trees will be saved. The requirement is 30%, and a required 30-foot vegetated buffer will be provided along the south portion of the property. The rezoning site is located within the Mountain Island Lake Critical Watershed Area 1, which has a max 6% impervious limit. In order to stay compliant, the applicants are proposing a 7,000 square foot impervious transfer from the neighboring property shown on the screen, which they also own. The applicants have 2 modification requests. The first is to use mulch for their parking stalls. Staff does not support this request as it's not consistent with the intent of the zoning ordinance, As well, we have concerns over maintenance and safety. The second modification is to allow an existing shed to encroach into the required 30-foot buffer. Staff does support this modification request, as the buffer would mitigate the visual impact of the existing structure from the neighboring property. The rezoning site is located next to a future intersection improvement project. That project is to improve safety and traffic movements by removing one of the 5 legs of the intersection and installing a traffic signal. And there will also be a crosswalk at the west corner of the intersection. The Beatties Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan and the Beatties Ford Road Mount Holly Huntersville Road Small Area Plan both do not support the rezoning, as the rezoning site is located outside of both of the study areas and the outside of the areas that are calling for intensification. The rezoning site is also located in the Rural Conservation District of the future land use map, and that district calls for low-density residential development. The Planning Department recommends denial based on the plan being inconsistent with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan and with the Beatties Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan and the Beatties Ford Road Mount Holly Huntersville Road Small Area Plan. If the town board approve this, staff does have a recommendation that the existing activity center be shifted slightly north to line up with the approval. And if you have any questions, I can answer those for you.
Thank you. I actually have a couple questions for you. So mulch has never been previously used for any project or approved for any projects for a parking surface.
No, I believe we've had one project where we allowed gravel, but I believe that was for a park.
And so my question was going to be around gravel and what I know is different zoning. What I was thinking of is, Chris, what's the name of the project? What is it? Ivory Barn. Ivory Barn.
So the Ivory Barn is located in the rural zoning district, which as a venue, if approved through an SUP, they can use gravel for their parking surface.
Would staff have a lot of consternation about going that route to sort of play into more of the feel of the property, but still get away from, obviously, the mulch?
So it wouldn't line up with the intent of the zoning ordinance for a commercial project like this. And gravel would still have the complications of being an impervious surface.
Correct. I mean, so with that, we would have to go to something, unless they went pervious
So
pavers.
we would
we'd
suggest
have to
that if they
go
do, they would go
impervious.
through, they can use brick, they can use some sort of paver system, or pave it with asphalt. That would be our suggestion.
Gotcha, okay. And then the impervious transfer, I know the impervious is available at the other property. Is it to a certain stage, if you will, where we know that if their project gets, should the project go all the way through and get approved, that they're good to go on that? Is it to that
It has
point where
not
it's just waiting?
started, but it would be a fairly simple administrative process.
So survey on each property to calculate it, and then there we go, okay. And the project itself, because that would be one of the conditions, if for some reason the impervious transfer, it was determined that it couldn't happen, then that would be one of the conditions that couldn't be met, and the project would not be able to move forward.
If for whatever reason it couldn't, I can't see one
Okay.
this time.
And one last question for me, as far as the activity center. You know what, I'll hold on that question.
Okay.
I'm all set. Anybody else have questions for staff?
We have the applicant
Well, we'll get to them next.
for staff.
Well, I have a question for him, so I'll ask him out. For staff, go ahead. Sorry.
Good, all right, no, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I kind of sent an email on this earlier, and I was trying to look across our spectrum of projects and find something that's similar. So the CSD athletic fields on Beatties Ford Road is the compare point I kind of tried to use for this. And that was approved, I think, by right in 2018, that you can do athletic fields in rural zoning. Correct. Okay, all right. And so I guess the question is, we're not rezoning for the purpose of athletic fields. So if we consider all the other goods and services that they're offering here, what exactly is driving the rezoning?
The indoor meeting and rental space, office space.
So a coffee shop would be okay, and because
So
that's
there
part
is not a coffee shop proposed
Not
here.
this- okay, okay.
As part of outdoor recreation, they are allowed to sell like soft goods as well as, coffee.
Okay, okay.
But they would not be able to run a full-scale commercial kitchen.
Food trucks, things like that are allowed to come in on weekends in a rural space? Accessory use? Okay, okay, okay. Okay. That answers that one. The next one's a little protracted, but hang in there with me. So also trying to compare the Long Creek Activity Center with other things that are going around, because you're talking about stretching this one out, right, when we do this. And I looked at the Huntersville East Activity Center, and this is what we're looking at now. So we in the second phase of North Creek Village, we actually stretched that one too, right? We stretched it down the hill toward Rama Creek. So I'm trying to understand the difference there, because in Long Creek here, you got actually two small area plans. And over there, you've got one, I think it's called the Davison Concord NC 73 area plan, that has the same kind of detail in it, putting the bounds on the small area plan. And in that case, I don't know if you remembered it, I think it was 2018, 19, when they got approved. Did we redraw the lines of those small area plans when we did that one?
Yes, when that was approved, the centroid for those small air plants shifted to basically on top of where Publix is today.
And south, because it comes well beyond the existing small area plan.
You have the zoning districts, but our quarter-mile circle stays the same. If this were to be approved, we would just ask that circle gets shifted up.
Would you also shift the small area plan for Beatties
Yes,
Ford Road
you
corridor?
would update all the small area plans and as well as the 24.
Okay, okay. Got it, thank you.
I think Lee kind of asked my question already, but going forward, just say 5, 10 years down the road, they could sell their property. What could come here and be developed under this rezoning?
Just outdoor recreation and office and rental space.
When you say office, I mean, could somebody put a one-story office building in this?
No, so what you see on the rezoning site plan
Yeah.
is what's approved.
Okay, so somebody would have to come back.
Correct, yeah. If they wanted to keep the same uses but add a new building, they would have to still come in with a
Okay.
completely new site.
All right.
Any other questions for staff? Yes. Go for it, sir. Oh, Trina.
So, hi. What is I'm trying to understand, this is critical watershed. That was what you guys said before, that you really oppose this because of the critical watershed. I think, for me, I'm trying to understand how asphalt is better in a critical watershed than gravel or mulch.
So I would first start with, we're not opposing this because of the critical area watershed. They are compliant with the critical area watershed. The critical area watershed does not allow for intensification based on the 6% limits, but they would be staying underneath that 6% limits with this project.
Okay, so what about the asphalt then?
So that is something that we require for commercial parking, and they would have to work within the limits of the critical area watershed impervious limit.
I'm not sure that that answers my question, but I understand why you said it the way you did.
Well, I'll add a question to that. So regardless of where this project would be placed, you would be against mulch. It has nothing to do with the critical watershed.
Yes.
It's just the fact they're using mulch. My question is concerning sidewalks. I noticed that the applicant is not requesting a modification on those this time, and I understand that because it's required by the zoning ordinance, they have to be built. But I'm trying to get, I was checking the plan for the improvement to the intersection, and it showed a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of Beatty Ford Road, but planning department is saying 10 feet.
Right now, the plans do show that, but we are going to work with Public Works when they put this in to make sure that the required 10-foot side path is placed in a way that when they put it in, it's not going to be removed, and to account for that 10-foot side path in the plans.
Would the 10-foot side path count against his impervious area?
No.
Okay. So then the second part of that is, they plan on, right now the plan is beginning construction in the summer of 2025 on that intersection. The applicant, if this were approved, at some point, he's going to be required to build the sidewalk, the multi-use path on Beatty's Ford Road, and build the Broad Street sidewalks. The town is going to come in behind that and going to rip those out and replace them?
We're going to work with Public Works to make sure that at the same time that they put that in, the new intersection, that the side path and the sidewalks are not removed.
So if they're damaged in any way, the town will repair those?
Damaged, then
Okay, that's reasonable. That's, okay. That's the only questions I have of the staff.
Going back to the mulch and the parking, if they did not receive the modification and were required to put in asphalt, do they then exceed their impervious area? And would they have to get additional impervious from the adjoining site?
the impervious transfer would cover the impervious that is required if they had to put in the asphalt.
Got you. So no additional impervious would have to be transferred. It would already be covered.
Correct. And they would still be under the 6%.
Thank you.
Couple follow-up questions, and actually, I'll go right off of that. Say, what's the number that's being transferred over, 7,000?
7,000.
And say, even if they have to pave the parking stalls, the 7,000, if they're, say if they only need 6,800, with however this goes today, with that being part of the condition, do they have to take the 7,000, or if they realize they need less, can they leave the extra on the originating property?
I believe we would be able to work with them on that number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then as far as the 10-foot multi-use path, some clarification here. Was it the applicant that offered that, or the town asking for that?
Are you saying for the applicant offer up the 10-foot side path, or?
Whose idea was that?
It's a requirement of the zoning ordinance.
But the projects that the town is doing, the infrastructure projects, it sounds like, and maybe I just didn't hear it right, that we're bringing a 5-footer up to that.
Yes, I believe so.
So we're requiring a 10-footer for a few hundred feet.
The origin of the 10-foot side path comes from our bike and sidewalk plan. The origin of the 5 Points project started before that plan was adopted. So we do have the ability to modify things for ourselves. We have disagreements on staff as to how this should be administered, but that's something we deal with internally.
Okay.
That project is proposed to have 5-foot sidewalks. This project, the rezoning, it requires a 10-foot side path. Of course, we'll work with the applicants to make sure that's put in the right location. We can delay it, we can bond things, we can do, there are lots of tools we have to make sure the money is spent once. We're not spending public dollars to rip out their sidewalk that they just put in. We're not going to do that.
Okay.
All right?
All right, good. And then, I know as far as staff's opposition to this, you had stated not tied to it being in the critical area. Is it at least fair to say that the way the small area plans were designed, that it absolutely took into account, in this scenario, parcel by parcel, as to what was CA1 and what was not?
Yep. You can see the delineation within that 2040 plan. So that border is drawn along that critical watershed.
Gotcha.
You'll see it right there as well.
Yep. Okay. Sure.
Mentioning parking spaces, and this was probably in the staff report and it went over my head, but I'm going to ask the question. How many parking spaces is the applicant required to have?
I believe it's 8,
And how many are they providing?
22.
So if they got into an impervious problem, they could reduce some of the parking spaces? Yes. The last comment I would make is I heard the department head say that we modify these multi-use paths sometimes, and I'll give you an example. It appears, I think up on Highway 73, where it's close to the lake, that one side of that road, there's discussion about it being 5-foot path, sidewalk, and the other side 10-foot because of the lack of space to work through there. I don't know that's a problem here, but this could be reduced if it had to, if it were a problem. All right. Thank you, sir.
And one last question, just before we make a decision on the mulch, no mulch. Your aversion to the mulch is more of a maintenance issue, it spreading outside of the bounds, it not being refreshed, it just looking unkept and becoming more of a grass space than a defined parking area. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
One more, and Brian, this is probably for you. So your recommendation for denials based on land use, right?
Correct.
Okay. So can you think back, I think it was David Pete's project, but North Creek Village Phase 2. Did staff recommend denial on that one based on land use?
Great question, and I haven't read that staff report in a long time. At one point in time, we were not in favor of that. I did believe we worked to at least a neutral position on that. But there was a lot of back and forth and some delays in that project.
You wouldn't recall the planning board and the,
No, we can get you that information for sure.
that's okay. I know one of the answers. Thank you.
I do know the applicants would like to make their presentation to you all
Sure.
this evening. Anything else for us? Great.
The applicant would like to come on up. Name and town for the public record.
My name is Katie Carpenter. I live in Huntersville.
My name is John Uri, and I also live in Huntersville.
Mecklenburg County? ETJ?
All right, guys, you are welcome to go through the full presentation, give the highlights, whatever you feel appropriate.
Wonderful. I'll hit the highlights since I know Nathan already spoke on a fair amount, as well as I'm sure many of you also watched the meeting we were at a few weeks ago. So a little bit about us. John's a third-generation Lake Norman native. He's a North Met grad, and he also went to App State and was Yosef for 2 years. You can ask him about that at a later time. As for me, I've been in the area for 10 years. My dad was military, so we travel around a lot. I'm a veterinary technician with a master's in business and a regional operations director for 26 veterinary hospitals. I'm a certified CrossFit coach and wildlife and reptile rehabber, and for fun, I have Crohn's disease and celiac disease, so I'm all about being an advocate for proactive, preventative, and healthy lifestyle. You already know what our rezoning scope is. A little bit more about the site location and proximity. So we are very close to a whole lot of other commercial entities. So 200 feet from Martial Arts Training Institute, 300 feet from Lancaster's Barbecue. If you zoom out a little bit further away, we are 2,500 feet from a major shopping center, which includes a Food Lion, CVS, Smoothie King, multiple other businesses, as well as, most recently, the Millionaire Social Dance Academy, which has pole fitness, cabaret, and adult theater. So why this location? This location completes the Long Creek Gateway as drawn here. So this plan was from the Beatties Ford Road Protection and Enhancement Strategy. We're in close proximity to similarly zoned projects and the intersection improvement, which you already heard about. So as you can see here, you saw the Beatties Ford Road small area plan. The red and the blue calls for larger commercial, smaller commercial, as well as office and institutional on both sides of Beatties Ford Road between Mount Holly, Huntersville, and all the way up to McCoy, except for our little island. As you can see here, the Long Creek Gateway, this does complete it, our location. So area growth, Long Creek by the numbers, there are 165 existing homes within a half-mile radius of this site. And across the street in that pinkish color, you'll see that D.R. Horton was approved to put in 140 new homes, and they've also extended that, as I'm sure you guys all know about. Additionally, there's 130 apartments in that purple color at Mosaic was approved a few years ago, and there will be more commercial and office space coming to this area. So 165 current homes, and there's about to be 270 new addresses. Figure 2 people per house there. You're looking at least 500 or more new residents to this area very quickly. So here's our site. Here's the intersection improvement that is coming. Additionally, there are 10,500 vehicles that drive up and down Beatties Ford right in front of this site location every single day. You can see this from NCDOT traffic studies online. Nathan already covered all this. So we're asking for highway commercial conditional. So our site plan is seeking this, which keeps the control of the usages allowed on this site in the hands of the town. And this is the most frequently requested rezoning option in North Carolina, as many projects don't fit in the standard rezoning options. So what does this mean? That the business plans cannot be expanded without town approval, future owners cannot expand the scope without town approval, and the conditions stay with the land, and they are only applicable for this site. So our business offerings, co-working space with rentable office and meeting rooms, as well as a club space such as gardening, senior and veteran coffee clubs, lawn game clubs, community watch club, book club, etc. One of the things we're very excited about is our gardening club. We're gonna have 10,000 square feet of dedicated gardening space. Native fruiting bushes and trees will be planted throughout the property. There's already a bunch there that we've put in. We'll have a pollinator garden, composting, and composting education, as well as honeybees will be located next door on our other property. Additional business offerings will have beverages, coffee and soda, juice, ice cream and smoothies, and beer and wine. As we said earlier, we will not have a commercial kitchen on this site, so we will be procuring pastries and other healthy snacks from local businesses, micro farmers, entrepreneurs in the area. Our hours of operation have been reduced since our original presentation. So feedback from the last board, neighbors, and town manager on our hours were to mirror the closing times of the already established businesses in this area. So this site would close at 10 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays, and at 9 o'clock the rest of the nights. Monday through Friday we'll be open at 8, and then on Saturdays and Sunday, feel free to sleep in. We won't be opening up till 10 a.m. Some drawings of what we're proposing. There were some concerns with the neighbors around noise, as well as some town board members. And so to speak to those, the loud sound noises from outdoor activities was a concern. There will be no amplified activity announcements. The only sounds will be of cheering on teammates. There'll be no loud music, so no amplified live music will be on this site, but we will offer acoustic. And we've moved the outdoor activity area since the last time you guys saw us from, which is now 350 feet away from any neighboring homes, which is over a football field. In addition to sound barriers, we're putting in the neighbors requested a privacy fence, so there will be a 6-foot privacy fence across the back side of the property. There's been petitions of opposition as well as information on the internet that was false about our project. So just a few call outs. We're not a liquor bar. We're not a sports venue. We're not a music complex. A little bit more about the site location. So we are in the ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So everything in yellow on this map is ETJ. And what does that mean? That means the town of Huntersville has governmental authority over these parcels. However, these parcels do not pay town of Huntersville taxes. They do not receive town of Huntersville services, nor do the residents of these parcels have voting rights in the town of Huntersville. If approved, we volunteer to be annexed into the town of Huntersville. Our property will be subject to town of Huntersville taxes then, which would bring additional revenue to the town, as well as creating entry-level jobs for Huntersville. You've heard that we are in the critical watershed. We do have, as you guys have already heard, enough impervious surface rights for our plan. And the Huntersville Municipal Code in regards to the critical watershed supports what we are asking to do. If you zoom in, you can see that overall impervious area and amount of the paired parcels average density development calculated by built upon area shall not exceed the impervious that would be allowed if the parcels were developed separately. Additionally, the municipal code states that the paired parcels may include or be developed for residential and non-residential purposes. You guys already saw this. A little bit of history of Long Creek. So this is a sale advertisement when the parcels in this area were up for sale back in 1929. If you zoom in, you can see that athletic fields have been in the area for over 100 years. So when these parcels were divided up, there was already outdoor recreation here. Some leagues that were in the area at that school were baseball, football, basketball, cheerleading. This brought hundreds of families and kids to the area most nights and on most weekends. We're offering to bring a small scale of that back with our proposed volleyball and yard games. So, Town of Huntersville established growth plans for Long Creek Urban Village. The Beatties Ford Road Small Area Plan calls for an urban village centered on Long Creek Elementary School. You've seen this. So how do we align? LU-4 says limit the scale of new development in critical watersheds. It states to allow very low density development in critical watersheds. We have a 6% built upon area, which would mean low density development. And as we've spoken about, while we're asking for highway commercial, this is highway commercial conditional rezoning. EOS-5, protect the water quality, states to restrict development in watersheds. Restrict is a verb that means to confine within bounds or to place under restrictions as to use. Restrict does not mean prevent. It also states to discourage intense development in critical watersheds. This rezoning and development is low impact and low intensity. It also states to continue impervious surface transfer option. We are requesting for parking stalls to be mulch, which is in line with EOS 5.3 to encourage low impact development. Additionally, LU-8 states to emphasize form and flexibility in activity centers and allow for multiple types of land uses. EV-2 states to encourage entrepreneurial business development, promote and encourage local business, particularly small business, foster a dynamic, diversified, and inclusive business climate. This project is unique. We're not another cookie-cutter, corporately stamped-out business. EOS-5 says to prioritize tree canopy. The site plan only requires the removal of, I need to update this, it's only 2 trees, and we'll be adding back additional native trees as well. Beatties Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan calls for recreational activities in this area. LU-1 states to regularly update the future land use map. It also states to update or new plans may be needed for areas that have experienced change since their adoption. And the project site is a reasonable distance to other similar zonings. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this, but a community plan guides the investment programs and prioritization decisions made by staff and town agencies, and it can be amended periodically as needed. This rezoning is not staff supported due to it being outside of the activity center. And this is the graphic where we would move that up if this were to get approved, which would also slide the activity center completely into Huntersville. Everything below that black dotted line is City of Charlotte. So the original plans were drawn for this area to include a whole bunch of Charlotte where Huntersville does not have any jurisdiction. This would slide it up to include all of Huntersville. And this is a map of neighbors in support of our project. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Lee?
Mine's a quick one. Can you go to the previous slide and let me look at that one a little longer? I saw that in the board meeting the other night and was interested. So across Broadway, there, you've got directly across from your property, you got this parcel here that's a no, I guess.
That blue is the D.R. Horton. Oh, across
To the
right
west,
behind us?
To the west.
To the west, yes.
Then there's one in the corner that you noted on the
Correct.
thing you handed out, okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I have a question.
Go ahead, we can still do questions.
Going back to the parking and the mulch, can you shed some light on why you're asking for that? I'm sure, is it cost only? Is it aesthetics? What's the rationale for not?
Yeah, so the rationale behind it is to encourage the low-impact development, because it would be pervious instead of impervious to have the mulch parking stalls, which would allow for additional drainage. We have the impervious surfaces to, as you guys have already heard, to transfer. This was simply an ask as we thought about the aesthetics of the property as well as not having as much damage to, we could pave it, absolutely we can. We just asking for not having to.
Do you have any concern over the maintenance of it as mulch?
We don't have any concern over it. We're going to be there and we're going to be maintaining it. And we want it to look good, of course.
And I think that's some of what, as we sit here and review this, is we have to look at it not only as far as what the two of you will do, but, you could sell this tomorrow, and then we may be dealing with a different applicant that may not take it as seriously. And again, I'm thinking through this that, if it's not maintained and it's a rainy 4 or 5 days, it literally could be a mess out on the road. So, I'm thinking worst case scenario here, but it could happen. That's why I was trying to understand, what was your rationale for? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And we also spoke with Nathan and Brian too, as are there any other pervious pavement options that are town approved for this rezoning or any? And we were informed that there were not at this time. Is that correct?
Yeah, you would have to work with Mecklenburg County stormwater on that.
Chairman, that's all I have.
So mine was along those same lines. I read this as you were going through it as fast as I could. But this says pervious pavements, and I guess the argument is, are we considering mulch pavement, right? So I don't consider mulch pavement, so I don't think that it applies here, right? And I know that there's some pervious pavers out there that we've approved in the past, and I don't know how that works. I mean, it seems like a fairly slam dunk idea. Oh, my time's up. I'm out.
There you go. Pervious pavers are evaluated on a case-by-case basis through Mecklenburg County, through the stormwater administrator. Sometimes the soils aren't conducive to that, so they could take a lot of excavation, bring in different types of soils. We are working with the county to reevaluate these products currently and maybe amend our ordinances and our manuals to make them more readily available, but at this time, that each project has to get evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and I'm only aware of 2, potentially 3 projects in town that utilize them.
So with that thought in mind, I mean, if we're going to sit here and maybe agree that mulch works as a pervious surface, I mean, we're talking about the same soil beneath that mulch that the county would be evaluating for a pervious paver. So, I mean, yeah, if we're gonna approve mulch, then I don't really care what the county says about the soil beneath a paver, right?
If the soil is absorbent, it's not.
Right, yeah, I get it, but yeah, if we're gonna sit here and say, okay, mulch is good, then, yeah.
And I hear you, and like I said, for us, it's more, there's a slight aesthetic appearance to it. Maintenance, if we continually get heavier and heavier rains that are down floors, they're flash floods, mulch is gonna float, it's gonna float away, it's gonna get into the drainage systems. That becomes a maintenance issue, not only just for them, but as the stormwater systems as well. And then safety, folks do trip, fall, those types of things, splinters, twisted ankles, those things do happen. But that's their liability, that's their insurance. These are just our recommendations. It's up to everybody else to make the decision.
Real quick, yeah. I mean, I agree with the mulch as far as aesthetics. I don't agree, I mean, I would be concerned with wet, soft stuff, with it being, tires getting some, because you got the topsoil layer there, and I am a fan of pervious pavers, by the way. There's a lot to do to get to that, but I would highly recommend, I know gravel is not allowed in the ordinance, so that would have been a good option. But yeah, I think with the mulch, you've got that topsoil there, and that's what's going to get kind of nasty, I think. Down with the pervious pavers, you got enough, if you got the right soils and you get the infiltration, it would work well. And like I said, my concern is just tracking mud around if it's loose. Anyway, that's all I had.
I really have a question for staff. That is, to clarify my understanding of use of mulch, river rock, and this P-rock gravel, that can be used for landscaping and not count against your impervious area, but if you use it for a walkway or driving on it, then it counts against your pervious area.
Correct, yep.
Okay. And my last comment is that in a motion I made in August, I was not going to, I was recommending allowing mulch, and I remember a previous planning director standing up, and I watched him this morning again speak, that said he had never successfully seen mulch used for parking in all his years.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
A comment, not a question. It's not under our purview by any means, but have you explored change of use for the structure? I assume you will need a change of use. I don't want you to be surprised by that cost associated with it. That's public announcement only, nothing to do with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if nothing else for staff or the applicant, I will take a motion.
And I have one. In considering the proposed rezoning of petition R23-06, Beatty's Ford Family Entertainment, the Planning Board recommends approval of the amendment. The amendment is consistent with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan Policy OU-1, encourage a development pattern that follows the future land use map, and that the development is located within the Long Creek Village Activity Center and provides a low-density commercial and recreational component of support for said activity center. This recommendation is consistent with and supported by Huntersville 2040 Plan Policies OU6, OU6.1, OU7.1, OU8.1, EV2, EV2.1. In addition, the rezoning is supported by the 2040 Community Plan Economic Development Goal of balancing the tax base and encouraging entrepreneurship. The amendment is further supported by the Beatty's Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan, which identifies a Long Creek hamlet or urban village mixed-use center generally located between McCoy Road and Mount Holly Huntersville roads. Defined in the plan as a hamlet development pattern that fosters residential, instructional, or recreational activities adjacent to Long Creek Elementary School and retail commercial in the vicinity of the intersection of Beatty's Ford and Mount Holly Huntersville Road. The amendment is also supported by the Beatty's Ford Road and Mount Holly Huntersville small area plans for the reasons previously stated. The Planning Board does not recommend approval of the modification request to allow mulch for the individual parking stalls. That was modification 1. The planning board recommends approval of the modification request to allow an existing storage shed to encroach into the required 30-foot buffer on the south side of the property. That was modification 2. The recommendation for approval is contingent upon all red line comments being addressed with staff. It is reasonable and in the public interest to approve the rezoning because it is consistent with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan, Future Land Use Activity Center Character Area, the Beatties Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan, and the Beatties Ford and Mount Holly Huntersville Road Small Area Plan. The end.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Vice Chair, can I make an amendment to your motion already?
You may request one.
Can we add in there about the activity center being shifted northward to at least encompass some portion of the subject parcels?
I don't think that's necessary, but if you think, if this is approved, the town board will move it. It will be moved. What would you like me to say?
I just thought we had to cover our bases with
Okay.
that and point that out, but
I'm willing to do that. I'm not sure it's necessary.
it's okay. It's okay then, never mind.
Okay. All right. First thing I'll say is, if you want to go back and, if you really love this stuff, go back to the video that I watched this morning, August 22, 2023, planning board meeting on the first time we heard this petition. I call that Part 1, Family Entertainment Center. We voted then that night 8-0 for approval. We did not deny it. It was 8-0 for approval. I don't see, what I see before me in this plan is an improvement to that plan. And so therefore, I'm still in support of this project. I see this, some of the questions about low density. This is highway commercial because some of it's going to be used for daily, hourly, whatever office use. That's the only reason. Other than that, this is a very low intensity highway commercial development. It's not a gas station. It's not a restaurant. It's not a hotel. This is the 21st century, and that's what people do now. A lot of people don't go to an office. They go to a place where they can sit down and do their work. As for the shape of the activity center that we discussed, I believe the shapes of these activity centers are that the circles on the land use map are just circles that are there to give you a general idea of where the activity center is. It is not set in stone. If you go look at the North Village that Lee Hallman mentioned earlier, up at the intersection of Davidson Concord Road and Highway 73, that is 0.8 miles north-south and a half a mile east-west, if you go plot it. It's not a circle. That activity center adapted to the development that grew there. And I believe this activity center, well, all the activity centers will do that. And that concludes my comments.
I just want to applaud you for having the perseverance to come back. I don't personally understand the big drama. I think that this absolutely does match the character. It's the same as it currently is. So I'm a little confounded by the idea that it doesn't match the character, especially given some of the projects that we've seen come through that, I mean, we last month approved a massive complex for storage. So I'm just a little bit, I don't even know the word, confounded is the best I can come up with. So thank you for bringing it back. Thank you for improving it, bringing it back. I agree. Y'all know about pavers more than I do. And mulch, if it's not a good idea, it's not a good idea. Thank you.
Frank, I have an amendment. Yes, sir. I would also like to add as in support for the 2040 Community Plan Policy LU4, limit scale of new development at critical watershed. EV2, encourage existing economic assets and entrepreneurial business development. EO3, prioritize tree canopy preservation in the lower intensity areas. And EOS8, improve access to parks and open spaces.
What was the last one?
EOS8, improve access to parks and open spaces. And I think you may have covered all but LU4, EOS3, and EOS8.
I accept that amendment.
Yes, I'm sorry, I accept the amendment.
Are we back in discussion?
Isn't EOS 8 only referencing public, though?
It actually says improve access to parks and open spaces. It may say public, but I would argue that will be used as an open space.
Okay.
I'm in support of it. I think it'd be a great community amenity. I think it's unique. I think that's kind of what makes Huntersville who we are, is to have these unique gathering places, and I like to see more of them.
Any other discussion?
I'll go. Excuse me. I'm going to have to side with staff on this one, and yes, I did vote for it the first time around, and I think a few of us had the idea that, great idea, but maybe it doesn't belong in highway commercial, but back off and look at it. It's really just the office space that we're looking for the rezoning, to support the rezoning. The idea that, yeah, the activity centers, they're dotted lines, they can move around. But with the small area plans, we spent time and money on those things. Some of the people that live around this may have had input on it. And they're defined by parcel, and it's just too far out of the bounds of the small area plan to go reach in and get it. And yeah, the first time I was kind of voting with my heart, pretty much subjective, saying I like sport, this is a great plan. But when I started looking at what happened at North Creek, and I was dead against that, and the reason that is oblong, Frank, is because they suck off the Highway 73 corridor, and that's the narrowest piece, and they go all the way down into the most rural of roads we've got, Black Farms Road. If you look at the definition in the community plan for rural, the picture is the silo on Black Farms Road. So it's in this North Creek, I'll quit bringing it up in a minute, comes within probably 1/8 of a mile of that. So for that reason, I can't support it. It's just not in the plan.
Lee, I've often said that if every one of us agreed every time, you'd only need one person up here.
I support the plan. I think it's a great plan. I think the character of that area with saving the existing home, working by that, from a community standpoint, driving by, I mean, visually, it's going to be enhanced, actually. And you're in a critical watershed. There's not much you can do. You can't. It's a very low dense project, and I support it. I think if you look at the activity center and you look at the planned road improvements, obviously they're extending the road. You're putting a 4-lane road there in front of you. You can't tell me that activity center is naturally just going to there. So I support the project.
For me, it's simple. My interpretation of the small area plans are exactly parcel by parcel. These parcels were only excluded because of the critical area watershed. We have rules and regulations that can address that, and the applicants are utilizing that. Problem solved. If the couple of parcels in between the subject parcels and the ones that are in the small area plan, should they be able to do an impervious transfer as well, then, and there's a project that goes there, then there's at least a chance I'd be in favor of that one too. But this fits. Critical area watershed problem is solved by existing rules and ordinance, so I'm good with it. Any other discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries 7-1. Thank you. All right, 4B, let's consider a recommendation on petition TA 23-08. This is a request by the how would I get our town name right? Jesus. Huntersville Planning Department to amend zoning ordinance Article 8.3 to remove regulation of nuisances language. Mr. Farber, go for it.
Okay, so I'll submit my staff report to start. Staff is proposing to remove regulation of nuisances from Article 8.13 and leave that article reserved for any future text changes. A little background, noise and noxious fumes are covered by the Town Code of Ordinances. This makes Article 8.13 redundant. This also conflicts with the enforcement procedure set forth for such violations within the Town Code of Ordinances. The town does have an interlocal agreement with Mecklenburg County to police and enforce ordinance requirements within the town's ETJ, and we enforce the town's Code of Ordinance within the town's ETJ. The general police power authority is typically used to regulate these nuisances, not code enforcement officers, as code enforcement officers are not going to be available to investigate these violations after any normal business hours. And here's a side-by-side of the zoning ordinance and the Code of Ordinance related to noise nuisances. They both cover the same thing. The Code of Ordinance goes into further detail on specifics relating to noises. And here is again this side-by-side of the zoning ordinance and the Code of Ordinance related to fumes and odors and vibrations. Again, they both cover the same thing, while the Code of Ordinance goes into specific situations as well for individual nuisance items. On December 7th, 2023, the HOAB unanimously recommended approval, and staff recommends approval based on consistency with all policies of the 2040 Community Plan and compliance with state statutes, as well as to remove any redundancies with the zoning ordinance and the Code of Ordinances and to clear up any possible confusion. And if you guys have any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions for staff on this text amendment? In seeing none, I will accept a motion.
I'll make a motion. In considering the proposed amendment TA 23-08, the Planning Board recommends approval based on the amendment being consistent with all policies of the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan and compliance with state statutes. It is reasonable and in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because it complies with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan and state statutes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? Oh, sir, yes.
No, one comment for the record, to make sure. The Ordinance Advisory Board had a long discussion about this only because we were having trouble understanding in the discussion. The bottom line is, once we finally realized that the Huntersville Police Department would be enforcing our ordinance, not a county ordinance, we had no problem with this. Because we did not want the Huntersville Police Department having to jump from ordinance to ordinance depending on where they were.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? And seeing none, motion carries unanimously. On to other business, of which there is none. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I'll vote for that if you promise to go vote.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning? Any opposed? Have a good night.